Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. I wanted to take a moment and just talk about accountability. Now, accountability falls under everything that we do in life. Doesn't matter what it is. But this week, I want to talk about accountability specifically with recovery. Recovery from substance abuse and alcoholism. This week, I was working with an individual who's been in recovery now for 2 years. And along his journey, he's had several relapses. And each time he had a relapse, he had to kick himself and, he felt bad about it. And I guess the feeling of failure really kind of hit. However, when I really tried to explore this with him, he started laughing and he said, well, you know what they say, once an addict, always an addict, right? And to me, that felt just like a slap in the face. Because I don't buy into that phrase. I don't buy into that phrase at all, not even a little bit. It has no credence. And the reason why it doesn't hold any credence to me is because it's a contradiction. When I first came into the halls of recovery, the one thing that everybody made sure that I understood was that recovery is possible. If recovery is possible, then how can I always be an addict? The one thing I want you to know is I know recovery is possible because, well, I'm living proof of it, right? 27 years clean and sober. So to me, that once an addict, always an addict, it's just a contradiction. But I think it goes a little further than just being a contradiction too, right? Because when he used the phrase, I can see it in his face that he was using it as a cop-out. He was using it as an excuse. And it was an excuse not to be accountable for the actions that he took or, for his behaviors. I understand it because sometimes the steps that we take and the bad steps, the poor choices, well, you know what? It hurts. Right? If you have to sit down and you got to look at them honestly, they really do tend to bite. But that's not a bad thing. Feeling that bite is letting us know that we're just not following what we're supposed to be following. So when I look at the phrase, I look at it, the fact that it's not allowing us to be accountable for the actions that we took that led us to relapse. I want to be clear about this, though. Relapse isn't a death-defying thing for you. It's not going to be you hitting rock bottom. A relapse is a relapse. That's what it is, right? What that means is that, well, what we tried to change, it didn't work. We didn't have the right tools in place. That's not a bad thing. It's not really a failure. What it is it's a reset. Is figuring out what those tools are that we need and putting them in place. Now, I was told this week by an individual I love and trust, and they told me that the phrase, once an addict, always an addict, is a guardrail. So I had to ask, well, what do you mean by a guardrail? Well, people put it in place to cause the fear that, they may slip. And that way it kind of keeps recovery and relapse in the forefront of their brain. I don't buy that either. And I had to explain this to the person because a guardrail isn't fear-based. It's never going to be a fear-based. And what I mean by that, a guardrail is somebody that you have that you can call when, you're starting to feel urges or temptations or when you're having drug dreams. A guardrail is having a clinician that you're working with to work through recovery. Those are guardrails. Having a phrase, once an addict, always an addict, isn't a guardrail. What it is it's holding you stagnant. It's not allowing you to grow. And I think that's one of the things that what we have to do in recovery is figure out how to grow. And thinking about this really kind of hit me in a couple of ways, right? Because when I first came into recovery, I used to introduce myself as, hi, I'm Fred, I'm an addict, or hi, I'm Fred, I'm an alcoholic. And I did that because both were true. But I no longer introduce myself that way. And before I tell you how I introduce myself, let me walk you through the process. Because there has to be a process, right? Now, I want you to take a minute and I want you to imagine, if you can, a stairway. There's 3 steps on that stairway. We're going to call it the Recovery Stairway, okay? The first step, and it's the most important step, is when you decide that you want to come into recovery or you want to stop putting the drugs and drink down. You walk into the halls Or when you're seeking help, you introduce yourself, hey, I'm Fred, I'm an addict, or hey, I'm Fred, I'm an alcoholic. That's probably the most honest thing that you've said about yourself in quite a long time. And that's that first step. It's admitting that there's a problem. It's admitting that you're trying to put it down and that you want to make progress in your life. The second step is being accountable. As you start working a recovery and you're abstaining from the drug and the drink, then you get to say that you're in recovery when you're finding the tools that work. So that second step was, hey, I'm Fred. I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery from substance abuse and alcoholism. And it shows and it promotes your growth. It shows your accountability. It shows that you're working things the way they need to be worked, right? And there's a third step, and a lot of people don't agree with me on this third step, but I don't care. And the reason why I don't, and it's not to knock anybody, and it's not to knock any specific group or organization, but that third step, and this is the way I introduce myself now, and I only introduce myself this way when somebody's talking to me about recovery. I let them know that I'm Fred, and I'm a recovered addict. Or I'm a recovered alcoholic. And if I can introduce myself as recovered, then once an addict, always an addict just doesn't stand for me. It doesn't stand as an excuse. It doesn't stand as destabilization. It doesn't hold me stagnant. It doesn't hold me back. It's not a crutch. And what I mean by a lot of people don't agree with me on it is I tell people that I'm a recovered addict, and I hear people all the time, oh, you'll never fully recovered. And I call BS on that, right? Because no matter what happens with addiction, we have to understand that it's a condition. Just like cancer, just like a broken leg, just like, a sprained wrist, it's a condition. And you can recover from all of that. There may be people in your life asking you, how can you recover from that? Well, you know what? The bottom line is I'm somebody who's dealt with cancer twice. I've gone through treatment twice. There was a point in time after my second treatment where I was told that I was in remission. What that means is the problem was still there. It just wasn't prevalent. It wasn't going to kill me anymore. So I was in remission. The tumors weren't able to be found, but there were still markers and proteins in my blood that showed that cancer was still there. But there was a point in time when all that changed. Proteins were gone. The cancer cells were gone. The markers in the blood system were gone. So what does that mean? That means I recovered. It means, quite honestly, I beat cancer's ass twice. That's what that means. And as somebody who's been in recovery for 27 years, well, I beat addiction. I beat the alcoholism. And how could I say that? Because today I know I could face life head on. I don't have to rely on a substance. I don't have to rely on a drink to numb me down, to make me feel different, to cloud my thought, or, to make me hazy because I don't want to feel it. I don't want to face it. I don't have the urges. I don't have the desire, but that's me. But I want to really stress the point that recovery is possible. You can find the way. You can find that door. You can find the key. I think it's important to know that when we start talking about accountability, right? It's owning what we do. It's owning how we do it. That's accountability. When we first come into a recovery, we have to start reframing things. When I talk about reframing things, I'm talking about we have to reframe our identities. We have to build what we want to become. We can't depend on anybody to change our behaviors. Changing your behaviors is a great thing. However, you're going to sit there and you're going to white knuckle it for a long, long time because you're not changing the thing that needs to be changed. And white knuckling it doesn't do anything good for anybody. What happens is when we start to white knuckle things and we're not really doing the work that we need to work, our old self will start coming through again. It's only a matter of time. And the reason why is because if you don't change what needs to be changed, it's always going to be in the driver's seat. And you're just going to sit there and you're going to be there for the ride. And you're not going to be able to make those decisions because the old self is always going to come through. No matter what we do in life, we have to figure out how we want to build what we want. And what I mean by that is when I came into recovery and I started wanting to rebuild a new life, I wanted to build the life that I wanted. I wanted to walk away from what I didn't. But I had to be honest about what happened in my life, where I was responsible for what happened in my life, and really start taking the steps to change that, to become the man that I wanted to be. You can't do that without accountability. You can't do that with a phrase, once an addict, always an addict. Because if you truly believe that you're an addict and you always believe that you're going to be an addict, then you're always going to be an addict. That's all there is to it, because the old self isn't changing. The old self isn't going away. You're giving permission for the old self to stay there. You're giving permission for the old self to keep driving. There has to come a time where you want to be the driver. You want to go where you want to go. And you have to let that old self go. It's time for all of us in recovery to stop holding ourselves back. Stop giving bad advice. Stop telling people that they need to put these fake guardrails in place in order to maintain sobriety. What we need to do is we need to start having better conversations about accountability. We need to have better conversations about what our actions did to contribute to where we are. I'm talking about everybody who's in recovery. I'm not just picking on anybody. I really want to be clear about the fact that I'm somebody who suffered trauma. So there's going to be people who dealt with traumas, like severe traumas. There's going to be people who dealt with a lot of things in their life. And they're going to say, but you know what? I went through this and I went through that. Well, here's the thing about that. We can't change what happened, but we can change the way we perceive ourselves through what happened. When we go through trauma, when we go through addiction, when we go through whatever we're going through in life, the fact is we build our identities around that. We have to change those identities in order to change our behaviors. That's where the real work lies. Changing the behaviors for a little while. Well, like I said, the old self is just going to come back. The old self is going to take over. It's going to continue driving. It's going to bring us where we want to be, and we don't have the roadmap. So we have to build it. We have to be accountable for it. We have to be able to admit what our actions were, what our actions are, what our choices are, what our choices were. And we have to change that. We have to rebuild what needs to be rebuilt. Without that, well, like I said, there's no roadmap. Without a roadmap, we stay lost. So that's why hearing that phrase this week pretty much was a slap in the face. Because I'm recovered. I don't consider myself in recovery. I consider myself recovered. But I want to talk to the new people real quick, the people who had just come into the walls of recovery. Because I want to applaud you and I want to recognize you because you just did the single most important thing you're ever going to do in your life. You started this journey. And I'll say that relapse doesn't have to be part of your story. But there's also a chance that it could be. That's not a failure. It's a reset. I really want you to understand that from the bottom of my heart. You've made it through whatever you've gone through. You've made it through addiction. You've made it through whatever your substance of choice was. And you're here today. I want you to take a second. I want you to recognize that because you're here today. And like I said, it's the most important step of any journey is taking the first step. And you took the first step. But like I said, we have to figure out how to be accountable to ourselves. Don't let anybody dictate that you're an addict and you are always going to be an addict, because recovery is possible. Don't let anybody tell your narrative. Your story is your story. And how you want to work through your story, well, that's your roadmap. That's your path. So if I can leave you with anything today, I want to say, stay on your path. Hold that accountability. Take the steps that are appropriate. And I'll see you all in the next one. Have a good day. If you got what you need out of this little video, please like and subscribe. Maybe even share this with somebody else who needs to hear this today. Catch y'all later.